Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DFO Fantasy Show. Today, we're going to be breaking down the entire Western Conference from a fantasy hockey standpoint. If you missed yesterday's show, we did the entire Eastern Conference from top to bottom. We're going to look at projected lines, DFO consensus top 300, ADPs, try to find you some hidden gems, some value in the early rounds, some ADPs to avoid. Just break it all down, find some players that are good to add at the end of the draft. Pretty much everything, breakdown skaters, goalies, everything that we can find out about the Western Conference. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right in at the tippy top with the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars have the highest projected point total. Now, the projected points you see on screen now are from the sports books. So it is an adjusted sportsbook projected total. So the sports books obviously release their over-unders for the season. But if the over is minus 114 and the under is minus 106, the over is more likely to hit than the under. So we adjust accordingly for what the sportsbook odds are, and then that's how you get your projected adjusted standings. So we've got Dallas at the tippy top here with a projected point total of 108.8, which is not only the top of the Western Conference, but actually the top of the entire league heading into the season. So let's take a look at their line combinations now, where a lot of the same names are back. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out this year with some of these players. We've got obviously Duchesne coming off a really big year. We had Tyler Seguin last year missing most of the season. Wyatt Johnson in more of a third line role for much of last season. We've got Jamie Benn missing time to start the season. I was really anticipating some more balanced offensive lines where Wyatt Johnson was maybe going to get more of an opportunity. And so far, the Stars have really juggled things up throughout training camp, so I'm not totally out on Johnson being like a guy that can certainly center the top line this year. I'm just a little bit more hesitant than I maybe was early in the preseason. Right now, skating with Fax and Bork. But like I said, the Stars have really shuffled things around throughout the entirety of preseason, so it wouldn't surprise me if he is in more of a prominent role. But this is what they're going with right now, and it's a little alarming if you're, a person that really likes Wyatt Johnson, somebody that's targeting him, or somebody that's already drafted him. Top line remains what we saw for much of last season after they made the Mikko Rantanen trade. Robertson, Hintz, Rantanen, Duchesne, Seguin back together with Sam Steele on the wing. And then on the blue line, it's mostly going to be Heiskanen and Harley, who you're going to be targeting in fantasy drafts, unless you're in a banger league where Liam Michel just suddenly becomes an absolute stud. We'll get to him in a moment. On the power play, new head coach of the Dallas Stars, Glenn Gulletson, said he's not going to hesitate to rotate between Heiskanen and Harley, and that's really going to affect who's got the most value. I've been very hot and bothered with Thomas Harley throughout the preseason. He's the one that I prefer to target, but he's going to also cost more on draft day. So I think Harley's the better of the two and probably going to spend more time on the power play. He opened training camp on that top power play unit. Now they've been working Heiskanen in. I'm imagining they're just kind of working with both looks, and I would assume that Harley will likely be the one that starts there. But as I mentioned, Heiskanen is the one there at the moment. So now we're going to bring up the big board here. This is the rankings, the ADP, the projections, everything that you can find at dailyfaceoff.com, all rolled into one. So let's bring up the Dallas Stars here, go over some of these rankings, go over some of these projections, and find some hidden gems. So Mikko Rantanen, we've got as the 10th overall player. His ADP is 10.5. So right around ADP, I think he's a really good pick towards the back of the first round. Really no hesitations there. It's going to be obviously, need to bounce back a little bit from what he did in the regular season last year, but what we saw in the playoffs was vintage Mikko Rantanen, and I think that he is every bit as good as a top 10 pick in fantasy this year. Jason Robertson, we've got ranked 24th. He's actually going 34th. So really like the value you get with Jason Robertson. If you start the draft with Connor McDavid at number 1 and you can turn it into Jason Robertson at the 2-3 term, it's a really good start. 2 potential 100-point players. Obviously has not reached 100 points in the last 2 seasons, but obviously a full year with Mikko Rantanen, I think certainly going to help. And I think Robertson can have a huge bounce back season here, or not really a bounce back, but kind of a resurgence and a potential return to 90 to 100 points. Wyatt Johnson, I mentioned him. I still, we got him ranked 46th overall. He's going 67th. So I think that there's still value there, and I think it's worth taking a swing on that upside. And to be completely honest with you, he spent most of the season last year on the third line with Jamie Benn anyway, and still had a really good year. He's got back-to-back, I believe, 74-point seasons. So basically a lock for 35-35. And if he moves up the lineup, I still think there's some untapped upside. So I think that maybe the upside won't be fully on display early in the season, but I think it can be unlocked. Roope Hintz is now, obviously, if Johnson's not moving up, I think Hintz has been the guy that's been kind of forgotten in fantasies, dropping to pick 105, which is great value if you want to wait on centers. If he's going to end up spending the whole year with Robertson and Rantanen, there's so much to like about Rupe Hintz. Now, I mentioned Thomas Harley. I've got him ranked significantly higher than 111th, but the consensus ranking at DFO has him at 111th. His ADP is 65. I am completely fine with that ADP. My bold prediction on the DFO Fantasy Show this year was that Thomas Harley could finish as a top 5 fantasy defenseman. If he spends the majority of the year on that top power play unit, he's going to be an absolute stalwart for fantasy this year. So I love Harley. The rest of the DFO analysts may not be as high on him as I am, but I love Harley this year. But I also think that Miro Heiskanen is an okay pick at 85, but I just prefer the upside there on Harley. Duchesne, Seguin, the rest of this crew, I think Duchesne is fine. I don't think he's going to replicate what he did last year. Pick 132, though. You don't really have to worry about that. Seguin, I think, is definitely a guy who's, first of all, got a great last name, but second of all, somebody that you can just fill at the back of your end of your roster. I think there's enough upside there to pick him. Let's move on to the second team in the Western Conference, who is the Edmonton Oilers at projected 106.5 points. Not really surprising to see them at the top. Really like the Edmonton Oilers for obvious reasons, but the problem with like the Oilers is you basically have to be on power play 1 to have a lot of fantasy value, and that has been kind of a closed club for the last few years. So it kind of limits who is valuable and who is not. But we'll pull up their line combinations here, and with Zach Hyman out for the start of the season, the Oilers have kind of stated that while he's out, they expect to play Draisaitl and McDavid together. The player that has been skating with them throughout the last few weeks has been Trent Frederic, which is super interesting. I think that obviously anytime you get a player who's going to skate on the top line with Leon and Connor, he's going to have fantasy value. We've seen guys have, of similar profiles, may not be the fastest skaters or the most skilled players, have success in this spot. Zach Cassian and Pat Maroon come to mind, and I think Trent Frederic can have similar production early in the season. And who knows if it looks good, or if he looks good on either of these wings, or on this wing, he could be a candidate for either wing if they ever move Draisaitl or McDavid apart from each other, which they will. They always do. They spend time apart, they get put back together. So Frederic is kind of auditioning for later in the season as well. And if he can become a permanent fixture within this top 6, I think he's a player that could have value at the back end of your drafts. Obviously, a guy that's going to be doing a lot of the dirty work on this line. So he's going to have some banger league appeal as well. The rest of this team, though, like obviously we know what we got with McDavid. We know what we got with Draisaitl. Nuge is kind of just an assist happy power play specialist at this point, a later round pick. But the rest of this roster is very up in the air, right? Tomasic, is he going to even make the team out of camp? Is Howard going to play as high up in the lineup as we have him projected? Coming into the preseason, I think that the idea for the Oilers was to have Mangiapane, McDavid, and Hyman together, with Hyman out. Mangiapane drops in the lineup. Savoy's got plenty of talent. Like there are players that are going to be streamable depending on where they are in the lineup. But in standard leagues, I don't think any of them outside of Trent Frederic are really that draftable. Just guys to keep an eye on. Howard, tremendously skilled, but a rookie. Could take him some time to get, hit the ground running. Mangiapane, if he moves up the lineup, is a guy that's shown it in the past. Savoy, obviously talented. So like these are guys to flag, keep on the waiver wire watch list, but like I'm not really wasting a roster spot on them early in the season because, like I said, if you're not on power play 1, there's really not a whole lot going on. So Tomasic is projected to be there right now. He spent some time there in training camp, but if he doesn't even make the team, obviously he won't be there. I think Adam Henrique is a candidate for that spot, and if Trent Frederic ends up taking that spot as the net front role in Zach Hyman's spot, then he's obviously got even more value than he does just playing on the top line as it currently stands. Let's get to the Edmonton Oilers projections. Obviously, we've got Connor McDavid ranked number 1 overall, consensus 1.6, ADP 1.3. So I don't think I need to talk about Connor McDavid. I still feel like he's the number 1 player in fantasy. We heard him in training camp or before training camp started saying he wanted to score more goals. We saw him crack 60 a few years ago. Like he has an unlocked ceiling that other players just simply do not have. It's just the safest floor, a ceiling that other players don't have. I still think he's the number 1 player, but there are arguments in the top 4. I think McKinnon, Draisaitl, and Kucherov all make cases for that top spot. But for me, still at the end of the day, if I've got number 1, I'm going Connor. Leon grades out number 4 overall for us. He's going ADP 2.8. So again, it's kind of like, who would you rather have? It's a personal preference. It's splitting hairs at the top with those 4. I'm fine with Draisaitl at 2. I'm fine with him at 3. I'm fine with that 4. I keep joking and saying, like, I just want the 4th overall pick, and I'll take whichever one falls to me. I'm happy. If you get a 50-goal lock and a 100-point lock at pick 4 overall, you're in good shape to start. Bouchard, obviously, tremendous talent on the blue line. Ridiculous numbers last couple of years. He's the power play 1 fixture. He's going to have ridiculous numbers again this year. Zach Hyman, where do you kind of draft him? Is, the ADP continues to drop. He's only expected to miss a month. ADP at 115, I think that's fine. Especially if you have a pretty balanced roster and a lineup that looks like it's going to be fine heading into the season. You can stash him on the IR. You immediately create a streaming spot to try to pick up some of these high upside guys. I don't mind that strategy. You can't pick him too early. He's kind of one-dimensional as well, right? Like, he's basically going to be like Chris Kreider was for years, right? He could score 40 goals. He's going to have a lot of power play production. The assist production is relatively limited, but he's a fine pick and a guy you can stash. Like I said, the rest of the lineup, I don't really care all that much about, depending on your league format. Like, obviously, Darnell Nurse in leagues that counts blocks and hits, big bonus. Matthias Ekholm, same thing. Jake Wallman, same thing. Nuge is fine. I'm not racing to pick up Nuge, but I pick 152.4. It's fine. I absolutely have no issues with that at all. I realized, and I did this yesterday on the Eastern Conference preview, I skipped over the Dallas Stars goaltending. I was just so excited to get to the Oilers that I skipped over the Stars. So obviously Jake Ottinger is a guy that we have ranked very high, currently ranked 29th overall. ADP is 18, though. I talked about it in the goalies preview episode. I just don't like the ADP. I talked about Sergei Bobrovsky yesterday. Sergei Bobrovsky is going like 30 picks later. I think they're very similar. And why waste a second-round pick on Ottinger when you could pick up Sergei Bobrovsky 2 rounds later? Just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't love the ADP. The names that you're passing on are great, but obviously a great fantasy goalie, a guy that's going to win 35-plus games likely, going to have good splits. Great goalie, just the ADP isn't for me. And then obviously Casey Smith's a guy that is going to be a really strong streaming candidate throughout the course of the season. Now back to the Edmonton Oilers. We'll talk about their goalies. Stuart Skinner is going to be a polarizing player throughout the draft process. And for me, I am extremely high on Skinner bounce back this year. I'm going to take him way ahead of ADP. His ADP currently sits at 124.6. I think that is too low for a guy that's going to likely start 50-plus games. He's likely going to win over 30 games. Fantasy goalies are such a product of their environment, and he plays on literally a team that's projected for 106 points this year. And if he starts 50 games, he's going to be a great asset. He's a great number 2 fantasy goalie that's going way too late. I was actually talking to a buddy of mine yesterday. He was in a dynasty league with 20 keepers, only a 3-round draft. Stuart Skinner was not kept in 20 rounds. Or with 20 picks, and he went in the 3rd round of a 3-round draft. So the disrespect for Stuart Skinner here is massive across the fantasy community, it seems, and I'm happy to take advantage of that. Just a quick note. Obviously, we've got Calvin Pickard here. The Oilers did trade for Connor Ingram yesterday. He cleared waivers while he was a member of the Utah Mammoth, so he was eligible to be sent to the AHL immediately, and that is what they did. It's just good organizational depth. They're going to give him time in the AHL to rediscover his game after some time off last year. So that's kind of a wild card in here. Like, I think that he's more of a threat to Calvin Pickard than he is to Stuart Skinner. I'm really not that worried about Skinner starting 50-plus games. So let's move on to the 3rd team in the Western Conference, and that is the Colorado Avalanche. Projected point total of 106.3. The Colorado Avalanche, obviously, they've been kind of the class of the Western Conference for the last few years. They're, things look obviously different now. Right? No Mikko Rantanen this year. How are things going to shake out? Well, early in training camp, it was Valeri Nichushkin on the top line with Nathan MacKinnon. Now it's shifted back to much more of what we saw a lot last year, specifically in the postseason when Landeskog was back. So it's Lehkonen, MacKinnon, Netchas right now. Landeskog, Nelson, Nichushkin on the second line. Colton, Drury, Olofsson on the third line. I won't be shocked if Colton, moves back to the middle. Drury on the 4th line. See how that bottom 6 shakes out. Really does not matter all that much. I think the only player in that bottom 6 that's going to have really any fantasy relevance this year is Victor Olofsson. Just good shooter. He's going to see some power play time, but he's going to be more of a streaming candidate. This top 6, though, really, really talented. Obviously, the blue line is Cale Makar, and that's kind of it. Devon Taves is fine. Middle round pick, usually. That's going to be just a steady force, but won't dominate any specific categories, but he'll just be fine. And he'll fill some role for you on the blue line. And then Brent Burns, obviously kind of a guy that you can scoop up super late if you want, but without a clear path to power play 1, obviously behind Cale Makar, probably not a whole lot of value in Brent Burns this season. Let's get to the Avs projections here. We've got Cale Makar ranked 6th, Nathan MacKinnon, as I mentioned earlier, ranked number 2. Nathan MacKinnon, not much you can say, right? Like, we know what he is. He's going to score a shitload of goals. He's going to pick up a ton of assists. It seems like every other year he just has a massive goal scoring year. We'll see if that happens this year. 120.81 assist projection is ridiculous. The more ridiculous number is the 343 shots on goal. It's just massive, and he, that is kind of like the one case that you can make for taking MacKinnon over McDavid. I'm going to bring up our fantasy customizable rankings tool where you can go in and put in your league settings, hit refresh data, and you get rankings customized to your league scoring. So this is fairly similar to like Yahoo standard league scoring, but I put hits instead of blocks in. So we'll look back at this. Like I mentioned yesterday, like if you're in a league where you get 0.9 for shots on goal and 1 for hits, like Brady Tkachuk ranks out third best, which is what I mentioned yesterday. This tool is really good, especially in leagues that have really interesting scoring settings. Guys that, it'll just help you unearth some of those gems. So I don't think that necessarily I'm saying take Brady Tkachuk third overall in this format, but take him ahead of his ADP. That's the way to look at this tool. When you look at it, though, in a fairly standard format, MacKinnon ranks out ahead by about 30 points over McDavid. So there's certainly a case to be made for taking MacKinnon there. And obviously, if you want to use this tool on draft day, you can just literally click the X as players are being picked. And super, super helpful. If you pick a player, you can star them. You get your team over here. You've got the players that have been drafted over here. Super useful tool on draft day. Super useful, especially if you're in leagues that have all sorts of categories. Obviously, you can add the goalie settings in here as well. Do the same thing. Connor Hellebuck gets picked, gone. So that is a super useful tool that you should use at your disposal, especially if you're in a league with some funky scoring. But back to the Colorado Avalanche. Cale Makar, again, don't need to say anything. It's more of just a decision about when you actually want to take him. How early is too early for a defenseman? I think this year the top 4 is clearly defined. I think at 5, taking Cale Makar is fine. Kaprizov, Pastrnak, Makar. I think that's kind of the next 3 up, in my opinion. Makar feels the safest of the 3. I think that Kaprizov probably has the highest upside of the 3, and Pastrnak scares me the most of the 3, just given the surrounding cast. No knock on Pastrnak himself. Marty Necas is a pending UFA, going to be playing probably the entire season on a line with Nathan MacKinnon. I mean, what's not to like there? We've got him ranked 31st. His ADP is 46.5, a guy that I'm targeting in every draft. Really, really good last year. Really strong start once he was traded to Colorado. Slowed down a little bit, but a full year here next to MacKinnon in a contract year, I think sky's the limit for Necas. Nichushkin, very polarizing player. A player that I have in fantasy a lot because he always drops more than he should. He's not really dropping that much this year. ADP 92, kind of in line with our ADP here, or with our projection ranking. Like, I have him projected for 65 games. He just does not play enough hockey. If he stays healthy and plays 82 games, he's going to be a steal without question. It just is a matter of durability. I think there's 2 schools of thought here. Like, one, it's like, I don't want to mess with that durability issue. The other one is, if you've got the IR spot, you can use that as a streaming spot and easily not replace, but kind of replace Nichushkin's lost value. And then obviously when he's back, he's going to be a threat. He's a point per game monster. He just simply does not play enough hockey. If he ever puts it all together, he's going to be a fantasy steal. Nelson was going way too early in the early ADPs, but it has dropped considerably. He was ranked really, really high in Yahoo rankings, and his ADP was like 90. It's come down to 161. That's fine. He's going to be on the top power play unit in Colorado. I think that's going to help him a lot. I think he's a fine player late. Again, if you punt C's and you draft wingers, D's, goalies early, and you want to draft centers later, I think Nelson's a fine target. Not a tremendous amount of upside, but he's fine. Lehkonen, I think, is a great target, especially now that he's back on the wing with Nathan MacKinnon. Similar to Nichushkin, right? A point per game beast, just doesn't really stay healthy. Landeskog going to be super interesting to see what happens here this year. Like, obviously, last time we seen him in the NHL 4 years ago, he was great. Like, the numbers were fantastic. He looked fine in the playoffs last year. I think there's upside here. I'm happy to take him at pick 160. I don't think he's like a keeper league target so much but in a redraft league, I think he's serviceable without a doubt. Well, let's keep this train moving. We've got the 4th ranked team in the Western Conference, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights, the last team in the Western Conference, projected for north of 100 points at 105.6. Obviously, a team that is always seemingly busy in the offseason and during the season, making all sorts of roster moves. And this year, they made the biggest splash of all, bringing in Mitch Marner from the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's projected to open the season on the top line with Jack Eichel and Ivan Barbashev. I think Eichel and Marner are two players that are going to fit really, really well together. I think that this is an interesting top line. Barbashev is obviously going to do a lot of the dirty work. He's going to get to the dirty areas. If you recall, last year, Barbashev had just an unbelievable start to the season, and now he opens the year with Eichel and Marner. I think it's certainly possible that he replicates that again. Mark Stone, always a guy that's going to be a point per game beast as well, and just can he stay healthy? He's a Lekanen. He's a Nichushkin. But when he's on the ice, he's certainly good. Dorofeyev is one of the more interesting cases in the league. When I statted him out in the preseason as a guy that's like, he's got how much is too many shots? Like, how many goals is he going to score? The sky's seemingly the limit, but on this like kind of second, third line, I would have liked to see him on the left side with Eichel Marner, but he does spend most of the time on the right side, so I get it. I think you could certainly have a worse center than Tomas Hertl. I think he's going to be fine. My biggest concern with Dorofeyev is how much power play time is he going to get? With Marner coming over, I think that is going to be a huge issue for Dorofeyev's power play usage. So I have cooled off on Dorofeyev throughout the preseason. I just don't know if he's going to be a permanent fixture on power play one like he was for most of last season. So we'll see. Obviously, he's one stone injury away from probably moving up there. I think that there's a case to be made that he could certainly replace any of these players outside of maybe Eichel and Marner. But I think the other option is that they go with a 5 forward look. We saw them do that a lot in Toronto with Mitch Marner on the point. So, there are plenty of options, but I've cooled off a little bit on Dorofeyev. But boy, when he's in the lineup, he shoots a ton. He has a lot of goal scoring upside this season, without a doubt. We've got Eichel ranks 14th overall. Consensus ranking is actually 15.4. ADP of 15.6. So right in line there. I think it's great. I still think that there is some durability concerns with him. So if we just kind of look really quickly at kind of who he's going around. So he is going right around like William Nylander. I think that Nylander has, is a guy that basically never misses games. I prefer Nylander. And similarly with Kyle Connor, like I think I prefer both those guys. They've got him sandwiched, but then you got to make that decision between like Eichel and Hughes. And Hughes obviously has had a hard time staying healthy as well. So I think that's kind of where I look at Eichel. It is right after the Nylander, Kyle Connor discussion. And then you get into a guy like Jack Eichel. Yeah, the durability concerns are kind of the only thing that scare me a little bit, but was obviously healthy last year. Really, really good season. Getting Mitch Marner could really unlock some goal scoring upside for Eichel as well. Speaking of Marner, I think he's a fine pick. I've got him ranked lower than ADP just because he doesn't score enough. The assist production, the floor though is ridiculous, right? He's going to be a 90 to 100 point player without question, and it's just a matter of who you're passing on. I talked about this a lot yesterday in the Eastern Conference preview. There's guys that are going to be great floors and put up an assist or two every single night, but they don't have a ton of goal scoring upside. Marner's kind of like the extreme of the extreme, right? He scores or he posts so many assists that you'd really have to almost not care about the somewhat lack of goal scoring. Still projected for 26 goals, so it's nothing to scoff at. It's just obviously you could be passing on potential 40 goal players at pick 19. That's all. Your appetite just needs to be how many goals are you willing to pass on? Shea Theodore is a defenseman that I am very excited about. When you look at the consensus DFO rankings, maybe not so much from the rest of the DFO fantasy analysts, but I am totally fine with him at pick 61. I'm fine with him a little bit above that, to be honest with you. I think with Alex Pietrangelo expected to miss the entire season, he has got a clear path to power play one, production all season. I think once again, it's just a matter of staying healthy for Shea Theodore. Durability concerns are the main issue, but when he's in the lineup, he's an absolute monster. If he stays healthy this year, he could be easily finished as a top 5 fantasy defenseman. Talked about Dorofeyev a little bit already, right? Projected, for only 17 minutes a night, so I think that's pretty good representation of where he is on the depth chart right now. Still projected at that time on ice for 264 shots and 36 shots on goal. So, Yeah, I mean, he could be a player that you could pair with Mitch Marner, right? Like in the draft, where it's like, okay, I got Marner in the second round, a little bit of lack of goal scoring. Let's try to add some goal scoring later in the draft. They pick 136. The value is still tremendous on Dorofeyev. I think he's dropped a little bit in ADP because of maybe some of the depth chart conversations. So he's a guy that kind of offsets some of that lack of goal scoring that you would get with Mitch Marner. Stone, point per game monster, mentioned already. Hurdle, I think, is being slept on a little bit. Pick 115. I think he's still got tremendous upside on a really talented Vegas team on that top power play, and I like him a lot. Barbashev's a guy that I'm absolutely targeting late in drafts, starting early, starting on that line with Eichel and Marner. Obviously, a banger league darling as well, projected for north or just under 150 hits. Between the pipes, we got. I think I skipped over the goalies again for the app, so we'll come back to them in a second. Aiden Hill, projected 67th ranked, ADP 56. I think he's fine. He's in an interesting spot when you take a look at all the goalies and the ADP, because he's going behind. Well, actually, he's jumped ahead of them now. Sorry. He was going behind guys like Sorokin and Wolf, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me just because like he's on the better of the two teams or three teams there. So I like Hill a lot. I think this is a good spot where he's going. I think it's not out of the question that he could outplay somebody like Philip Gustafsson and Darcy Kemper this year. I think that's certainly plausible. So I think Hill's going in a pretty good spot. I would be happy to draft him. Going backwards again, I really got to stop skipping these goalies. The Colorado Avalanche, this is a really interesting crease to start the season. Scott Wedgwood doesn't make the consensus top 300, but he's in my top 300 for sure, because Blackwood's banged up right now, and he's going to miss some time likely to start the season. So Wedgwood's a great third option to pick up at the end of your draft and have somebody serviceable early in the season playing on a team that is unbelievable. When Blackwood's back, though, obviously a guy that's going to be probably around 50 starts, 30-plus wins, a really, really good fantasy pick. ADP is a little bit rich, obviously, with the injury, though, so I probably won't have him on many teams unless he drops too far in drafts. Let's keep rolling here, speed things up with the LA Kings, who are projected for the 5th spot in the Western Conference this year with an ADP, with a projected point total of 96.7. I'm just going to start with the goalies. I'm already on this page. Let's just start with the goalies so I don't forget this time. Darcy Kemper, we've got him ranked 55th, ADP 52nd. The splits last year were insane. I think a lot of people are projecting the Kings to maybe take a step back this year. I think the one thing that they've always got going for them is they are just so good defensively. They're absolutely elite. They're going to insulate Kemper very, very well. He was a fantasy steal last year. I don't think he's going to come at a steal this year, but if you miss on those elite early round goalies, he's a nice target in kind of those, that 5th round. I think he's a guy that can certainly pay off his ADP. I think the splits will be really, really solid. I think he's a really nice plug and play option. There's not really a whole lot of matchups that you're just going to look at and be like, yeah, I'm taking Kemper out. Obviously when they play Vegas and Edmonton and some of those, dogs in the West, like you're going to have that conversation. But he played those teams last year, and they were just as good, and his splits were unbelievable. So I really like Darcy Kemper again this year. Obviously not as big of a value as he was last year. Let's pull up the LA Kings line combinations. There's no surprises here. This is basically the exact same roster that finished last year. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Kuzmenko had a ridiculous finish once he went over to LA. I think he is a fine late round pickup, a guy I'm going to definitely have on my waiver wire watch list, though, more than anything. Because, he's on the top line with Kopitar and Kempe. Fiala, Byfield, Laferriere, they were phenomenal together at the end of last year and throughout the majority of last year. So I really like that line. That's the line that's got the majority of my interest from a fantasy perspective, because I think that Fiala and Byfield are both dropping too late in fantasy, where Kempe is probably going, right around where he should. So not a lot of value there. On the blue line, not a whole lot. I think obviously one player to keep in mind is Brant Clark. Is he going to be on the top power play unit at any point this season? Is he going to take a step forward? I think it's possible. You're not going to have to pay the premium like you kind of were last year, where Drew Doughty is kind of the incumbent and a guy that's just going to be steady, that's going. We'll pull up the ADPs here in a second. I feel like Doughty's ADPs fluctuated a little bit throughout the preseason. So we'll start on the blue line with Doughty. We've got him ranked 185. He's going 129. So not a lot of value there with Doughty, where I think Brant Clark going 175 might be a better, just flyer as your 4th defenseman. I think that he's a fine pick there. Up front, I mentioned it. Adrian Kempe probably going right around where he should. ADP at 51. We got him ranked at 42nd. A guy that really excels in banger leagues. Super consistent. The shot volume is great. The goal scoring, the point production has been really solid. A guy that's just kind of a plug and play. Maybe lacks the upside a little bit, but in banger leagues, he's just tremendous. So if we take a look here at where he ranks overall, I feel like you're going to see his name popping up. Yeah, like 25th probably ish. So a guy that really excels in those banger league formats, and a player that even in standard formats is fine. Just kind of maybe lacks, like, I don't think that he's going to unlock this like 85, 90 point upside all of a sudden, but I think you can just pencil in another 35 goals and 40-ish assists this year. Fiala, it looks like one of the best draft day values in fantasy right now. Absolutely love him at pick 99. We've got him ranked 64th. I think I'm the highest on him too. Like, so I'm ahead of 64th. If I recall correctly, the shot volume remains great. I talked about him in the Daily Faceoff draft kit, which I'll pull up right now. I believe it was in my sleepers article. It was not. It must be in my must drafts. It's not. Okay, I'll find it here. I wrote about him somewhere. It's got to be in the perfect draft article. There he is. So he's sliding in the 9th round. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I've him graded as a 6th rounder. So obviously, as I just mentioned, makes exceptional value. But Fiala is coming off a career high 35 goals, but his assist totals totally cratered. That's not a long-term concern. He averaged 48 assists per season across 3 years prior, and last year's dip was fueled by just 3 secondary assists and an even strength IPP drop, which is individual points percentage, the amount of points you get on goals while you're on the ice, dropped from the mid 70s, which is something that he had kind of sustained throughout his career, to 63.6. So that is a jump we expect to see bounce back up. That's really just kind of going to be an improvement in these secondary assists, and positive regression there is almost certain for Fiala. So absolutely love the bounce back upside with him dropping way too late in drafts. And as I mentioned, Byfield, Fiala, and Laferriere last year were so good at generating scoring chances throughout the regular season that they're going to be a line that's going to be spending a lot of time in the offensive zone this season. Byfield, same conversation. ADP is 145.7. We've got him at 106.6. I think that he's a guy that can really take a leap this year and be a draft day steal. Absolutely love Byfield at that ADP. The rest of this team, like, I don't think there's enough upside with Kopitar to really warrant a draft pick. Doughty, I think, is going a little too early. Kuzmenko is more of a waiver wire guy. And then same with all these guys like Fogle, Laferriere, Deneau, Trevor Moore. They're all going to be fine streaming candidates throughout the year. So we'll have you covered with those streaming candidates throughout the season here on the DFO Fantasy Show, but not guys that warrant draft picks. So let's move on now to the 6th ranked team in the Western Conference, and that is the Minnesota Wild. Projected point total at 95.6. So the Wild obviously just signed Kirill Kaprizov to the most expensive contract in NHL history. The lineup looks very different than what it did a season ago. I mean, like, the key pieces are still there. Kaprizov, Rossi, Boldy expected to start on the top line. Liam Ogren really expected, really good year in the AHL last year, expected to make that leap to a full-time NHLer this year. He's going to play, or at least projected to start on a new look line with Eriksson Ek and Vladimir Tarasenko came over from the Detroit Red Wings. Danilo Yurov is going to expected to make the team on the 3rd line with Hartman and Mojo. I feel like they're missing some players early in the season. Yeah, Matt Zuccarello, that's who it was. Matt Zuccarello is going to miss some time early in the year. Probably somebody you can pick up very late or off the wire and stash on your IR. Pretty reliable fantasy player. Rodin, not really much of a fantasy asset. Where things get interesting is with Zeev Buium on the blue line. Really talented young rookie. Some of the highest odds to win the Calder this year. Probably going to be their power play 1 quarterback. He fits that role a lot better than maybe Brock Faber and Jared Spurgeon have in the past. So I think that he could really elevate this power play and unlock some extra points for guys like Boldy, Eriksson Ek, Rossi, and Kaprizov, obviously a stud there. So Buium's a player that's definitely going to be on the watch list this preseason, and somebody that I'm going to be targeting in drafts. Just depends where he goes. If you're in a league that's a little bit more casual and aren't aware of the name, I think that he's a nice pick. We've got him a little bit lower than ADP, but I have him right around ADP, so I'm fine with him at 146.7. I think as your 3rd or 4th defenseman, he's got really, really good upside, and a guy that I'm certainly targeting. Brock Faber is probably more of a format-dependent pick, especially without power play 1 time. I just don't think he makes a ton of sense unless your leagues count blocks or hits. Probably not a player that I'm going to draft. But Kaprizov is, as I mentioned, I think that he could be one of the best picks in the 1st round, going, ADP 7 or 8. So like I think that he could quite clearly play his way to a top 3 fantasy season. Obviously, some durability concerns there with him a little bit as well, but we got him projected for 74 games, 46 points, 46 goals, 98 points. Shot volume is really good. I think he's got top 3 upside. Whether or not he unlocks it fully remains to be seen, but he was on a ridiculous pace last year, just got paid at most expensive contract in NHL history. So he is going to have to show out this year without question. Matt Boldy comes in at ADP 34. We've got him ranked 33rd. I still think that he is a really nice upside, high upside pick here in the third round. I think, as I mentioned, if that power play improves at all, I think that he's still got a little bit more in the tank. I think we haven't seen the best from Matt Boldy, and a player that I'm still extremely high on. Joel Eriksson-Ek. If you listen to our positional preview episodes, Dylan outlines him as his value this year. I think at pick ADP 119, basically, he is a good value. The pendulum has swung the other way, right? Last year, he was a guy that was going like 65th overall. Now he's moved backwards about 60 spots, and the value is great, especially, again, if you're going to wait on centers, which still seems to be the deepest position overall, and he excels in those extended formats. A guy that's really got 30-30 potential with the ability to chip in 150 hits and 300 shots on goal. Volume shooter, he's fine at that pick. I think he's certainly a target, especially in those extended formats. Marco Rossi, despite spending basically the entire preseason on that top line, is dropping very deep into drafts. And I think he's still a high upside pick, a player, that was in trade rumors, never got moved, and now he's just right back where he was last year. And I think he's a guy that could take a leap this year if he plays a full season with Kaprizov and Boldy. I mean, you have to expect him to be very, very strong. He had really, really strong stretches last year where he'd go a couple weeks and get super hot, and everybody would pick him up, and then he wouldn't do anything for 2 weeks, but get bumped down the lineup. People would drop him, and it just kind of was like a vicious cycle with him last year. But I think he's a guy that could certainly take a leap this year. I will not forget to talk about the goalies because they are pretty interesting in Minnesota. We talked about Gustafsson a little bit earlier. He's obviously a guy that should start 50 games, should win close to 30 games. That's what we've got him projected for. The split should be good. I think he's a good pick. I think he's going maybe a hair too early. I think that there's some goalies that I would prefer to wait on, but I think he's not going to crush you. Jesper Wallsted's coming up from the AHL. Did not have a good year at the AHL level last year, but he is still a highly touted prospect. So he does pose, I think of, these early goalies, if you take a really hard look at who's going early, right? Like Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, Ottinger, Shesterkin, Blackwood, even Bobrovsky, Kemper, Hill, Sorokin, Stolarz, Wolf. I think if you look at all those guys, they probably all have less competition than maybe Philip Gustafsson does. I think you could obviously make the argument about Joseph Woll in Toronto. For sure, but they just made a financial commitment to Stolarz. I think he's their guy. I think you could make an argument about Scott Wedgwood, the way he played last year, but I still think Mackenzie Blackwood's the clear-cut number one when healthy there. So I think that Gustafsson feels a little riskier just because I do feel like he has a little bit more competition for starts. But if Wallsted's anything like what we saw last year, he's really going to pose no threat. He really struggled in the AHL last season, and I don't expect him to take a massive leap and really start eating into Gustafsson starts too much this season. Let's move on now to the 7th ranked team in the Western Conference. We've got the Winnipeg Jets, projected point total of 94.9. Pretty much the same team as last year, save for adding a couple of veterans. We've got the return of Jonathan Toews. Going to be very interesting to see Jonathan Toews back in the NHL. Gustav Nyquist also a new member, but top line remains the same. Connor Scheifele, Velarde, Perfetti, Toews, Nyquist on that second line. The third line, a little bit different because Adam Lowry's out to start the season, but it's probably going to be Nino Ryder, Lowry, I follow before long. Then Nemestikov will likely get bumped down to that fourth line. It's a deep team, man. The issue from a fantasy perspective for a long time, similar to teams like the Kings, that this is a team that just likes to balance out their minutes, and you don't see their top end guys playing 24 minutes a night like you might see in Colorado, but they're still very good. Scheifele was a massive steal in fantasy last year. Kyle Connor, really nice resurgent year. So I really like the Jets. The blue line a little bit banged up right now as well. You've got Dylan Sandberg out, I believe it's 6 to 8 weeks if I recall correctly. Let's just double check. 6 to 8 weeks with a broken wrist. So that's a massive loss for them to open the season from a defensive standpoint, but it shouldn't really affect the fantasy outlook too much. So when we take a look at the projections, the rankings, and the ADPs here for the Winnipeg Jets, I think Kyle Connor, one of my favorite picks in fantasy here. If you're at the tail end of the draft, love what you get with Kyle Connor. The shot volume is great. The goals, the assists, the power play production covers all those categories outside of the banger league ones. Great pick at the end of the first round. Scheifele, you're going to pay much steeper price this year, but we still have him ranked well ahead of ADP. I think he's fine if you want to wait a little bit, a few rounds on centers. Scheifele's a good number one center target. He kind of in that same bucket as like Nick Suzuki, Dylan Larkin, Nico Hischier. There's one that I'm forgetting. Oh, Sebastian Aho. They're kind of all going within like the same kind of block of rounds. And I think that if you want to wait on centers, all of them are really solid targets. Scheifele, Sebastian Aho, especially. Really consistent production with Scheifele. Josh Morrissey's interesting. Really good season last year. He's had a number of good seasons in a row now. The thing that I keep talking about is Roman Josi had what was you would consider a down year for Roman Josi. And then obviously the injury made it really difficult for fantasy. But if you extrapolated his like disappointing season over a full 82 game sample size, it almost exactly mirrored Josh Morrissey's numbers. And you can get Roman Josi like 20 picks later. So I think Morrissey's ADP is a little rich for me. But he's a guy that could play like 26 minutes a night early in the season with Dylan Sandberg out and really get off to a torrid start. So it's not that I don't like Morrissey. I'm just not in love with the ADP. Velarde, great value pick. Once again, just got to stay healthy. That's kind of the name of the game for him. Perfetti, I think, has got some unlocked upside, but I don't think he's going to be anybody that is going to explode this year, just given how much run Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, and company get, on the top line and on the top power play unit. So Perfetti's a streamable candidate. That's about it. Between the pipes, I don't think we need to talk about it too much. The tippy top of the rankings, we've got Connor Hellebuyck, the only goalie going in the first round in fantasy. I think that it's fine. I think like you're passing on really elite talent, and it's going to be difficult to just be like, yep, Connor Hellebuyck in the first round. I think that I would probably still pull the trigger, obviously, after like guys like it would be like the top four that I've talked about: Makar, Pastrnak, Kaprizov, Matthews. After they're gone, I think it's Hellebuyck time. I'm happy with that pick. You could have the argument about Rantanen over Hellebuyck, but I think that I would probably go Hellebuyck there. I think that's fine. But if you miss out, don't panic, right? I think some of these early ADPs with goalies is really tough. Vasilevsky is pretty early. You're still passing on unbelievable talent there. Ottinger, same thing. Shesterkin probably too early. Like I'm really waiting if I don't get Hellebuyck for like Bobrovsky at pick 42, or then to try to get into these guys in the 50s, whether it's Kemper, Hill, Stolarz in the 60s, Thompson in the 70s. Like those are kind of my main targets if I miss Hellebuyck. And I think that they should probably be yours as well, just given, how like, do you really want to pass on Tage Thompson in the third or fourth round when to pick a goalie when you can almost replicate that performance a round or two later? I just don't really think it's worth it. Let's keep rolling through the Western Conference now as we head down to the Vancouver Canucks, who have an implied point total of 91.8. Obviously, it was a weird year in Vancouver last year. I think that, if you tuned into the DFO Fantasy mock draft, great. If you didn't, go back and watch it. But we had David Quadrali, who is the editor-in-chief of the Nation Network, also editor-in-chief of Canucks Army. He outlined it that, Elias Pettersson is a guy that should be due for a bounce back here this season. I don't really see how it doesn't happen. It feels pretty likely to happen. They've got some pieces here that are fantasy relevant that are going to be great picks. But for the most part, like it's kind of just Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are the ones being drafted. And then the rest of them are all really kind of being left undrafted. And I think they all make pretty reasonable values, especially Brock Besser. Quinn Hughes here, ADP of 12.2. We've got him a little bit lower. There's one analyst that's dragging it down more than others. I've got him ranked at 14. I think that you can certainly pick him at the 1-2 term. I think it's fine. The shot volume and the goal production has really come around, and it's made him a much more viable fantasy asset. Like when he was like going the Lane Hudson style, where it was like, yep, I'm going to score 6 goals with 60 assists. It's just not that valuable. But now that he's scoring 15 goals a year, it's great. This production is obviously elite. I'm fine taking him at the 1-2 turn. I still think that I would rather pick Roman Josi a few rounds later and load up on wing talent, but the wingers in that category or in that range are kind of a little bit mushier, a little bit more questionable. So if you want a solidified pick in the second round, not lose your draft in the second round, I think Quinn Hughes is as safe as they come. Elias Pettersson just mentioned it. We got him ranked 71st, ADP 67. I think there's a lot of upside here, right? If he gets right. I have some concerns. Like I think that at that ADP, I'm fine with it. I think there's obviously the potential for him to return above that value. The shot volume was just way off last year, and it needs to bounce back in a big way for him to be a viable, top 50 player this year. So injuries, some off the ice issues played a factor last year. Fully healthy this year, I think that he gets back to being his dynamic self, but I do have some concerns a little bit, but the upside is undeniable. Brock Besser, as I mentioned, really good value. He's a guy that's, could score 30 plus with 60 plus points and then some this year. Offers a little bit of banger value as well. Not really be a drafted pick, 161, good value. The rest of this team, not so much, right? Like Kiefer Sherwood, obviously a banger league darling, projected for 378 hits. If you're not in banger leagues, not that valuable. Garland, Evander Kane, those guys, they're going to have streamer value. Jake DeBrusk, I think, is a fine last round pick, but not guys that I'm sprinting to the wire for either. Mostly Besser and then Pettersson and Hughes. Between the pipes, speaking of quads, on the show the other day, he was saying that he really expects Demko to be not a full-blown workhorse, but a guy that probably starts 50 plus games. I agree if he's healthy. The ADP, you basically need him to play 50 games. I think he's okay pick. Not one that I'm I would rather have Stuart Skinner at a very similar ADP. Actually at a much lower ADP than Demko. So I think he's fine. I think if the Canucks return to the playoffs this year, Demko is going to have a big year. So I think that he has the potential to certainly be a draft day steal. Do I think it's likely? I would say it's probably 50-50. I think that there's definitely a route where it goes wrong. I think that there's a route in which it works out, and it's just a matter of your roster build. If you've got a bunch of risky forwards, you might want to go with a safer goalie pick. If you've got a really safe group of forwards and defensemen, maybe you take a shot on a guy like Demko and hope that it all comes together. Let's keep rolling on through the Western Conference as we get down to the St. Louis Blues, who have a projected point total of 90.7. They, just narrowly outside the playoff picture here, according to the projected points. But this is an interesting team this year. They've got some new players. They've got some players returning from injury. Alexander Texier's got the wrong jersey on. Gonna have to fix that later. Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, Jimmy Snuggerud on the top line. You got Dylan Holloway, P.S. Suter, and Jordan Kyrou on the second line. Suter and Shen are interchangeable. I think that they're using Suter there a lot in the preseason to kind of get a look at what that looks like. I would be surprised if it's not Shen that at least starts there. But Suter and Shen both have that flexibility to kind of play in more of a checking line role or more of an offensive role. They can kind of both do the same thing. So they're kind of interchangeable. I don't think either one has a tremendous amount of fantasy value, but their wingers certainly do. And obviously you want the wingers playing with the guy that they have the most chemistry with. So we'll see kind of which center works out best there, but love Holloway, love Kyrou this year. Let's get to the St. Louis Blues projections and rankings here. So Jordan Kyrou ranks out at the top for us, 66th overall, ADP of 85.9. So you got about a full round of value there in Jordan Kyrou. I don't think there's a whole lot I can say or need to say, I guess, about Jordan Kyrou. The production is really, really steady. The shot volume is good. He's going to score 30 with 30 assists. He's got upside for more. Robert Thomas. I had him as a bust at the start of the pre-draft, preseason process. His ADP was 40. It has come down to 68.4, which is basically in lockstep with our consensus top 300. The assist production is unbelievable. Bit of a one-trick pony as a strict center. Probably not a guy that's going to make a lot of my teams. I think he's a phenomenal real-life hockey player. From a fantasy perspective, I think he's just fine and probably not one that I'm spending a top 70 pick on. Dylan Holloway, Banger League darling. We've got him ranked 98th, ADP's 101. In Banger Leagues, he can go a few rounds ahead of that. Had a really good year going last year until the injury. Offers a lot of banger value. Offers some power play production. He's a solid pick, especially in banger formats. But in standard league formats, still fine, right? Still got to project for 60 points, 25 goals. Fine with it at pick 100. Pavel Buchnevich, very similar. Production, 22 goals, 59 assists. It's fine. He's going 60 picks later. Obviously, a lot of Holloway's value comes from banger leagues, and that's why he's moving up in ADP. But I think Buchnevich is a worthwhile pick late in drafts. I think he's super steady. He's a guy that can add to the bottom of your roster that has center, left wing, right wing eligibility, and you can be flexible with where you put him in your lineup. Jimmy Snuggerud is one of my favorite late round targets. ADP 192, really, really good collegiate profile. Going to be on that top line with Robert Thomas. Certainly a guy that can perform at a high level. Looked pretty solid in the end of his audition at the end of the last season. Immediately was on that top line. So I like Snuggerud. And then, as I mentioned, the rest of this roster, not a whole lot there. I think, Shen, Suter, Neighbors, those guys are going to be streamable. Cam Fowler finished the year really strong last year. I think that the ADP is too rich to really take a swing on that repeating. But I think if he can, he'll end up being, he'll pay off that ADP of 153. But I just think there are safer picks on the blue line than Cam Fowler. Between the pipes, it's obviously still Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer. Binnington, the guy to own. Binnington looks like a really nice value here. ADP 97. We got him at 109. I got him right around pick 100 as well. But he's probably going to start 55 games, push for 30 wins, reasonable splits as your second goalie in fantasy. I like Jordan Binnington a lot. Let's roll on now to my favorite fantasy team in all of fantasy this year, and that is the Utah Mammoth. I don't think it's a popular or hot take. It is a popular hot take, but it's not a hot take to say that Utah is going to be a playoff team this year. A lot of people like this team to take a step forward. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm just in love with this team. If you listen to our positional preview episodes, our left wing, center, and right wing positional previews, my three breakouts were Gunther, Cooley, and Peterka. So I fully expect that line to be unreal. Keller's been great. Schmaltz is always the best or one of the best streaming candidates, waiver wire pickups every year. He just gets forgotten and then always puts together a nice season. Hayton, I still think, has kind of post-hype appeal. I really like what you get out of Mikhail Sergachev. I think Sean Durzee's an interesting fourth fantasy defenseman. So this is a team that I'm going to have a ton of stocks in, but it's going to be primarily with these top five skaters. And that's Clayton Keller, ADP 40. We got him ranked 30. Love him there. If you get him, you kind of just pencil in another point per game season, 30 goals, 50 assists. You're happy. 30 plus power play points, 200 plus shots on goal. He does it all except for hit. Dylan Gunther, is just going way too late. I do not understand it. I had him as the sleeper of all sleepers last year. Paid off handsomely. He got off to a torrid start to the season, and people are seemingly forgetting about him. I'm not forgetting, but letting him drop to pick 100 makes absolutely no sense. One of the best values on draft day. Absolutely love him. Think he could explode for a point per game style season. Could have 250 plus shots on goal. Also close to a hit per game. Love Dylan Gunther. JJ Peterka is a player that I've always been high on in Buffalo. Now he gets out of Buffalo, lands in a perfect spot in Utah. I think that's a line that's going to just dominate teams this year. His ADP 126, got 40 picks of value on him. There's just no reason to wait that long. You can pick him around pick 100 happily. Really good production. I think that this is a pretty modest projection. If things really click early in the season with Peterka, Gunther, Cooley, this is a line that could just absolutely go off. And Peterka could be, again, I think my bold prediction was that all three of them were going to be point per game players. I think there's a pretty clear path to that happening. Cooley just still coming into his own and just looked so good in the second half of last season. I think there's no reason not to target him at pick 144. You want to wait on centers. I've talked about Fantilli. I've talked about Cooley. If you literally want to draft no centers and have Cooley and Fantilli as your 1-2 center in fantasy, I don't think that's a bad strategy at all. I think they're both going to be fine in that spot on your roster. They can be go-to guys this year without question, in my opinion. So, love what you get. Look at this. Basically 40 picks of value with all three of them. I'm happy to take them all 20 to 30 picks ahead of ADP. I might stack all three of them on the same team and just hope that it actually all comes together. Mikhail Sergachev, another guy that just he played 25 plus minutes last year. He's going to play 25 minutes. One of those kind of rare guys that can score double-digit goals with 40 assists that you on the blue line that you can get like around pick 80. It really starts to drop off in those rounds. And Sergachev is one that I constantly find myself clicking on because he does offer really good offensive upside. And if this team takes another step forward, I mean, he could unlock another level, be a 60-point defenseman this year, offer some value in block and hit formats as well. Nick Schmaltz, again, you're probably not going to draft him, but you're going to pick him up. If you listen to the show, he'll be on your team probably before week one. Hate and post type candidate, not drafting him, but put him on the watch list. Jersey, same thing. Between the pipes, Karel Vejmelka is a popular breakout candidate this year, I think for good reason. We have seen ridiculously good stretches of hockey from Karel Vejmelka in the past. Whether or not, he can put it together for a full season, we shall see. But he's probably starting 55 games. He's probably going to approach 30 wins. And the splits, those are probably modest. I think he could easily put together a league average season where he has like a 905 save percentage and a 285 goals against average. And I think there's another level that he can unlock where he's like a 910 save percentage goalie. It just matters if he can put it together for the full season. Utah tidy things up defensively a little bit. He's going to be a great pick. Okay, we're getting into the bottom of the barrel here. We're going to start ripping through these teams a little bit quicker now as we get on to the Nashville Predators, who are projected for a modest 83.9 points. Now, the Predators are an interesting case strictly because they were just horrific last year, and I don't think it can go worse than it did last year, but they're already off to a tough start. Luke Evangelista, it remains unsigned, so he's not going to probably be there for the start of the season. 2025 first round pick Brady Martin might make the team out of training camp. I believe if I read correctly, he's living with Philip Forsberg. They've been pretty much on a line together all preseason. He's on the top line. He's also on the second power play unit. I think he's worth a flyer. I don't know if he sticks the whole year or if it's just going to be a 9-game tryout, but he's in a good spot to succeed, and there's really no reason not to, and I don't think many people are talking about him. So obviously if you're drafted tonight and he's not a lock to make the team, maybe don't pick him right away, but I don't know why he would spend the entire preseason on the top line and now late in training camp be on the second power play unit if he wasn't at least going to get 9 games. It could be as simple as this guy is on the team until Luke Evangelista signs, and then he's gone. So a name to remember, a name to consider on draft day, but not a name that that he might not end up being a full-time fantasy asset for you this season. The Predators are kind of an interesting team because I think there's the value here. Roman Josi, we have an ADP or average rank of 53. ADP is 50. His ADP has been coming down. I've got him ahead of the rest of our fantasy analysts, so I really like him. I've been talking about him all preseason. He's one guy that I'm trying to draft in every league. I mentioned it. Like, his season was bad last year, and it was basically Josh Morrissey. If he's fully healthy, which by all accounts he says he is, he's 100%. He's got his health condition under control. Like, he could score 20 goals with 80 points this year and be just right back to being Roman Josi and be a top 5 fantasy defenseman and be an absolute fantasy steal at pick 50. So I love Roman Josi this year. Philip Forsberg going right around where he should. He's a banger league darling, but he's just as useful in standard formats as well. Steven Stamkos, I think, has a decent amount of bounce back appeal here. Pick 133, obviously was a disastrous year for him last year, but I think he started to come on a little bit in the second half of the season. I think that, obviously where he's going, he's a very low risk, high reward pick. So he finished last year after basically March. So from March 4th through the end of the season, so 22 games, he finished on with 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points. So that was a 37 goal, 37 assists, 75 point pace for Steven Stamkos. The shot volume was solid. He obviously shot 21% over that time, so I don't think that is something that's going to continue. But he's a guy that if he gets like 200 shots this year, could certainly score 30-plus goals again with like 35 assists. So where he's going, I think he's a low-risk, high upside pick. Marchessault, just kind of steady Eddie. The shot volume's good. Offers about a hit per game. Where he's going, he's fine. The rest of this team basically just waiver wire pickups. Between the pipes, UC Saros is the dog. Really did nothing last year. He was a huge disappointment. Worst statistical season of his career. Had a save percentage under 900 for the first time ever. But he's going to be one of the most utilized goalies in the league this year. He'll be over 60 starts most likely, and that'll afford him the opportunity to win 30 games, even with this team not being very good. I think there's a lot of bounce back appeal here. His ADP is way too low. So him and Stuart Skinner are the two goalies that I'm really targeting in those late rounds or middle to late rounds this year. Let's keep rolling now as we get to the Anaheim Ducks, who come in next with a projected point total of 81.7. Excuse me. This team is kind of a popular breakout pick as well. I think that they have a pretty good amount of talent on this roster as we look at their line combos here. Chris Kreider comes over from the Rangers. Leo Carlsson finished the year really, really strong last year. A guy that could have a big breakout this year. Troy Terry, super consistent. Mason McTavish finally signed. He's back in the fold. I think he's a guy that could continue to build off his strong finish to last year. Cutter Gauthier is a guy that could really take off this year. They have a lot of breakout candidates, and they're, for the most part, like the Ducks are a team that are worthwhile to target in fantasy because these are breakout candidates and they're not being drafted as such, really. Jackson Lacombe, his ADP was too high, even for my liking. Like I really like Jackson Lacombe, but his ADP was too high. It's come down. Fine with him where he's at. Really good fantasy defenseman, especially in banger leagues. Block formats, he's going to offer a lot there. I think he can build off of last season. I really like him as like your third or fourth fantasy defenseman. Probably going to have to draft him as your third, and I think that that's fine. His ADP 119 is okay. We're a little bit lower, but I think he, in that range, there's not a lot of good defensemen left, and I think he's a fine pick there at 119. Leo Carlsson, I mentioned the finish to last year, the way he produced down the stretch. I think he's got a lot of breakout potential. Another player like Cooley, like Fantilli, that if you wait on centers, there's a lot of breakout upside here. Cutter Gauthier, same thing. Finished the season strong. A lot of breakout potential, not being really drafted as such. Both those guys, 181 for Carlsson, 175 for Cutter. They're auto picks in those spots. Like, must adds. We got him 20 spots, 30 spots ahead of ADP. Mason McTavish, same thing. Ridiculous strong finish to the last season, going 10 picks later than we think he should. Chris Kreider, kind of a one-trick pony. Hopefully he helps improve this power play. I don't really have any interest in him, but I think he's fine. Banger formats. But the hits have been drying up over the last few years. So Troy Terry is a guy that I think is just kind of a plug and play at the bottom of your roster. He's going to produce Vetrano, Granlund, Killorn, all guys that are just going to be waiver wire fodder throughout the season. Between the pipes, it's now Lucas Dostal's net with John Gibson gone to Detroit. Projected for 50 games. Never done that in his career. Projected for 25 wins. The splits are modest. The big concern here for Dostal is just like, how much does this team actually improve defensively under Joel Quenneville? If it's a lot, he's a breakout candidate. If it's not a lot, they were nightmarish defensively last year. Horrific. So not really interested in him if they're going to be that bad, but at pick 130, I think he's a viable third goalie, and he has breakout potential like the rest of this team. It's just they all kind of got to come together and break out together, or it's just going to kind of be disastrous for the most part. But defensively, they were horrendous last year. They need to be better without question. Obviously, guys like Jacob Trouba, Radko Gudas offer a little bit more banger league appeal, but in standard formats, not so much. The Calgary Flames come in next. They've got a projected point total of 81.5, which is a pretty steep decline from what we saw a season ago. They were almost a playoff team. The sportsbook's not really buying in to them, but I still think that they've got plenty of playoff potential. Coming into the training camp, Huberdeau, Kadri, Coronado was kind of penciled in as their top line. They worked with that line for a very long time in training camp, and now they're looking at other options. I think there's some fantasy assets here. I'm just going to skip the forwards entirely. I'm all in on Zane Parekh. Ridiculous. He had 107 points. He was fifth in OHL scoring last year. Ridiculous numbers. He's this year's Lane Hudson to me. Yes, he's making this team. Ryan Pike on the DFO mock draft the other day said he has to actively play himself off of this roster. He is expected to start on power play too. I think that he is quite clearly the best power play option on this team. I think they're going to dole back Mackenzie Weegar's minutes a little bit, much like they did with Mike Matheson and Lane Hudson on the power play last year. It's only a matter of time, in my opinion, before Zane Parekh moves to that top power play unit. I'm all in. I want him on every team. This is one of my favorite players in fantasy this year. ADPs, 145, totally fine. It would take him ahead of it. Consensus-wise, we're lower. I'm not. I am not. I'm in on Zane Parekh. The forwards, Kadri, literally one of my favorite center targets every year. He gets no respect. ADP's 142. He was one of my favorite picks last year. I waited on centers last year. My two targets were Celebrini and Kadri. I had him on basically every roster. So you can add him to that Fantilli, Cooley mix. Kadri, pick 142 if you want to wait on centers. Going to score 30 goals with 30 assists, 275 plus shots, has some banger league appeal. Love Kadri. Uyghur, very much like a Moritz Seider, where he is format dependent. In banger formats, blocks, hits, like there's literally nobody better. He does everything. The category coverage is unbelievable. I think from a standard format, I have literally no interest in him, especially at this ADP. He will go too early in standard formats because his ADP is higher than it should be because of the banger formats. If he gets supplanted by Zane Parekh, which I literally just said will happen, his value is going to crater in standard formats. In those extended formats, unbelievable pick. Huberdeau really finished the year strong. I think he's got bounce back appeal and kind of just really rediscovering who he was in Florida. I think he's going to keep, coming along in Calgary. But again, more limited goal scoring upside player, but okay, basically at the end of the draft. Coronado is a favorite breakout candidate of mine. Very conservatively projected here. He has 35 upside with the way he finished last year. I would like to see him play with Kadri and Huberdeau for full time, but I think there's at least 30 upside with Coronado this year, and a really one of my favorite picks in that late couple rounds. The rest of this roster, basically all just waiver wire fodder, not really worth talking about. We will talk about them during waiver wire shows later in the season. Between the pipes, it's Dustin Wolf's-Crease. Literally my favorite goalie target last year. He was going way too late. I had him as a breakout. It worked. This year, probably going to really, if you just take a look at those sportsbook projections, I mean, they're projected to finish fourth worst in the Western Conference. I find it very difficult, even if he starts 55 games, for Dustin Wolf to win 30-plus games if that's the case. He's being drafted among goalies that are basically locks to win 30 games, and that is just kind of my only concern with him. ADP has come down a little bit, so I think it a little bit more appealing, but yeah, I think he's a fine pick. I think it's maybe a touch too early. If he goes around later, I'm in. At that ADP, I think you might as well just, wait 10 picks and get Linus Ullmark or Logan Thompson. It's just really not worth the ADP price. Let's keep rolling. These last three teams, we're probably not going to talk about too much. Seattle, especially, they come in next. I think the one just kind of thing that we have to address is just how banged up this team already is. Jared McCann, Chandler Stevenson, Vince Dunn, Brandon Montour, all banged up, all not really in danger of missing time, but Capo Caco is going to miss time. Riker Evans is going to miss time. They have game time decision flags all over the place. This team is super, super banged up. From a fantasy perspective, I don't think anybody's elite. I think there's some decent value to be had on this roster, but not going to spend a ton of time here. I think Jared McCann is the one guy that sticks out, again, injured right now, that as a value. His ADP is way too low. He's been a really consistent player for them. I think he's solid. Brandon Montour, ADP is 99. We've got him ranked at 172. If I pull up the consensus top 300, I must be, insane, because I've got him at 85. The rest of these four just hate Brandon Montour. I'm not sure why, but just wanted to show you how high I am. I am completely fine with Brandon Montour at ADP at 100. He's a great pick, in my opinion. He's going to score double-digit goals. The shot volume is really good. Plays a ton. He offers appeal in those extended formats. They're way too low on him. I am fine with Brandon Montour. I think he's a fine pick. The rest of this team, I mean, I don't know what to do anymore with Matty Beniers. I think Shane Wright's got breakout appeal. Last round pick, sure, Shane Wright. That's about it. The rest of this team is just not that interesting outside. Vince Dunn's fine. I think his ADP is a little bit high. I'd rather, probably take Montour, if I'm being honest, but they're kind of indifferent. Vince Dunn at his ADP, Montour at his ADP, I think are both fine picks. Between the pipes, Joey Decord's kind of the new number one after last year. We got him projected for 55 starts. Modest win totals. He's a fine third fantasy goalie. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's keep rolling now as we talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. They have the second lowest implied total in the Western Conference at 71.8. Not a lot here outside of Connor Bedard. There is obviously some appeal in some of these players, but like Ryan Donato exploded last year. Not going to replicate that. Andre Burakovsky, probably just going to be nothing more than a streaming candidate. Frankie Nazar, I think, has breakout appeal. Beebs really loves him. His numbers away from Connor Bedard last year are alarming. His line mates in Teravainen and Bertuzzi are fine. Are they going to elevate him to fantasy stardom? Probably not. So worth a flyer at the end of the draft. But I've laid out many other centers that are going around the same ADP that I just much prefer. I just don't expect him to have a massive year. So Bedard is probably the only forward that I'm really drafting. Might take a late round flyer on Donato. Might take a late round flyer on Nazar, but outside of that, not really. On the blue line, Sam Renzel, similar to Zane Parekh, kind of all in on Sam Renzel as well. Let's pull up these projections here. So Bedard, obviously the top dog. ADP is 56. We got him at 63. His numbers last year suggest that it was a down year, and that there's real reason to expect him to have much better numbers this year. I'm just still concerned that he doesn't have enough talent around him, so we'll see. As a Red Wings fan who had Jeff Blashill as our head coach for a long time, he consistently frustrated me with his line combinations and just shuffled them like crazy, which is exactly what happened to Bedard last year. I think a lot of the similar stuff that happened to Bedard last year is going to happen again this year. So I think he's got upside at pick 56. I just don't think he's the safest pick in that spot. There's names that are going well below him that I much prefer. So Bedard probably won't end up on too many of my teams, but he could, he's one player that I'm a little nervous could make me eat crow if last year just truly was just a really unlucky season for him. Sam Renzel, though, I'm going to pull up these consensus rankings again because I've got him at pick 140. So the rest of these guys are dragging him way down. I've got him at 140. His ADP is 167. Perfect. Happy to take him around 140, 150. What he did last year, 9-game audition, was really impressive. The shot volume, I mean, just look at what he's projected for. He's projected for 23 minutes a night. He's projected for over 100 hits, over 190 shots, almost 40 points. So I likened his rookie season to potentially what we saw from Brock Faber's rookie season, where Faber was kind of their power play one quarterback for a period of time, where Renzel is like locked into that role. It feels like. So I really think that he has got great fantasy upside. I think he's got legitimate rookie of the year upside at his price. I got him at plus 5,000. I think he's plus 4,000 right now. Maybe a little bit lower in some books, but I think that he is a great dark horse candidate for that. And as your fourth fantasy defenseman, I mean, the upside is massive. And then if he doesn't pan out, you literally just drop him. He's your fourth fantasy defenseman. Who cares? The upside is too big to ignore with him there. Between the pipes, I don't think I'll end up with a lot of Spencer Knight. We talked about him a couple episodes ago in our undrafted upside episode. I think he's, if you're desperate for goalie help, need a third goalie, sure. He's going to start a lot of games. You're going to have to be ridiculously choosy with his matchups. But I think there's a world in where this team's marginally better and his splits are marginally better. But I don't think that, given where they're projected to finish, that's too likely to happen. Let's close out the show with the San Jose Sharks. I think that this is a much more interesting team than, from a fantasy perspective than the Chicago Blackhawks. I also think that this team likely finishes ahead of the Chicago Blackhawks in the standings, probably the Seattle Kraken for that matter. Their line combinations have moved around and been as confusing as can be throughout the preseason. I have no idea what this opening night lineup is going to look like. I think the only thing I can say for certain is that Macklin Celebrini is going to be their top line center and Will Smith's going to be their top line right winger. Outside of that, everything's up in the air. Michael Misa, I mean, the upside is great. He's skated with Eklund. He's skated with Toffoli. If he ends up being their second line center, I think he's a great late round pick. Tremendous upside. Probably going to work his way, onto the second. He's on the second power play. Could work his way up potentially. I think Misa is a worthwhile flyer as long as we, get confirmation that he's making the team. I hesitated to put him in my top 300 preseason. Throughout training camp, he's slowly risen up the rankings for me. Let's get to the projections as we close out the show here. With the Sharks, Macklin Celebrini, ADP 46. We have him ranked 49th. I loved what I saw from him last year. I said he was one of my favorite targets late in the draft. ADP this year, a little bit rich. He's really got to take a step forward. I think you're almost drafting him at his ceiling. So I don't love the pick, if I'm being totally honest. I think that there is like a 60% chance that he pays off this ADP. I think it's likely he takes a step forward. I just think it's not the safest pick ever, but it could still pay off. It's a little rich. Will Smith, I mean, what can you say? Really strong finish last year. He's going to be, permanently moved to the wing. He's going to be permanently tied to the hip of Celebrini. He's going 175th overall. We've got him ranked 38 spots ahead of ADP. One of my favorite late round targets. Tyler Toffoli, similarly, not going to, explode for 40 goals and 80 points this year, but he's going to be a reliable 30-goal scorer, has 30-30 potential, shot volume solid, offers a little bit in banger formats as well. William Eklund, Beebs loves him. I'm not quite as high on him. Again, he's just lacks goal scoring upside. He's an okay streaming option throughout the season, but not somebody that I'm really clamoring to draft. I think Jeff Skinner's got some bounce back appeal if he ends up playing on a line with Celebrini or even Misa for that matter, but not somebody I'm drafting. John Klingberg, I think is super interesting, right? Like he's basically going undrafted. I think you could easily add him like Renzel. Like Klingberg and Renzel would be like my favorite like fourth defenseman targets at the very end of the draft, because I think there's a world in which Klingberg has a pretty good year here on that top power play unit. I think he's going to be around 20 minutes a night. It's just so hard to project based off what we've seen from the last two seasons because his role is going to be so different. But I think that Klingberg is a like him and Renzel, like I said, my two favorite fourth defensemen to target at the end. And then Misa, again, just somebody that not 100% to make the team, seems likely at this point, though. Has obviously tremendous upside, really, really good prospect. Whether it turns into fantasy success immediately, we'll see. But overall, I think he's a target at the very end of draft. Obviously, a keeper dynasty target as well. Really like Michael Misa's game and excited to see his progression. Speaking of progression, Yaroslav Askarov, I think is a guy that's going to probably take a step forward this year. I don't think it's going to matter much for fantasy. You can spot start him in those cushy matchups, but he'll be around the 20% owned for probably the entire season. I don't think he starts or wins enough games to be a full-time fantasy asset, but I think that he is certainly somebody that's going to be a spot startable throughout the course of the season. 115 or an hour and 15 minutes of just nonstop fantasy hockey content. That's what we do here on the DFO Fantasy Show. Before we go, just want to close it out by saying, we're less than a week away from the start of the NHL season. If you've tuned in to the DFO Fantasy Show throughout the preseason, I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed the content. If you are just finding us, go back. If you haven't drafted yet, the positional preview episodes are so in-depth. Top 10 fantasy rankings for each position. We have breakout, sleepers, busts at every position. Go watch our mock draft. Just great insight from guys that cover the teams, especially the Canadian teams. Check that out. Smash the subscribe button on this channel because we are coming at you with so much content this year. I'm going to be doing a show every single day talking about season-long fantasy. I'm going to be doing a show every day talking about DFS. So if you are a season-long player, we got you. If you're a DFS player, we got you. If you're both, we got you times two. We also got betting content coming from Matthew Barnaby. It's just going to be so much fun this year. Smash that like button. On Monday, I'm going to be previewing the week. The first week of the season, we're going to go over the strength of schedule. We're going to talk about streaming candidates. On Tuesdays, we're going to be going around the league, talking about some of the most important topics around the league, bringing in beat reporters from different teams. On Wednesday, we're going to bring in Beeps. We're going to talk strictly about the waiver wire, a full episode about the waiver wire, who you should pick up, who you should drop. Thursday, we're going to preview the weekend with Dylan. We're going to take a look at the best streaming targets for the weekend, best streaming goalies for the weekend to really close out your matchups. And then every other Friday, we're going to be bringing you something. It's going to be a revolving door of content. We're hoping to bring some keeper and dynasty content on Fridays. So stay tuned for all that. Smash the subscribe button here on the DFO Fantasy and Betting channel. We will see you guys back here next week. NHL season starts, baby. Let's go. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.